Now they are using the GCP also. So, but there are many issues regarding given at least for 5 years. It should not be less than 5 years. Then there should be a impact assessment, environment impact assessment.
Then there should be no mining at all for 5
No.
years. No mineral lease for less than.
Not less than 5 years.
Right.
So they have not specifically mentioned or
Sand comes as a miner.
Correct.
So number 2, before giving any for you should have a environment impact to take a assessment certificate or what you call from the state impact assessment committee.
एक बात मुझे नहीं, एक बात बताते हैं, हम यहाँ विजयलक्ष्मी करते हैं, हाँ? और हम इधर हो जाते हैं, अपने आगे कर दे, सही ना कर दे हम विजयलक्ष्मी को, हम जानबूझ के हमने नहीं बोलता चल। ये दोनों साइड वाला हम लोग वहीं से लाए।
किसने किया डिजाइन?
मदुरई में ना हम लोग का जो ह्यूमन राइट्स का मेन वन ट्रांसपोर्ट है, और लोग सब स्टेट में दिए हैं, में जाते हैं वहाँ पे
यहाँ हम लोगों को दिक्कत हो जाएगा। आप लोग इधर बड़े भाई
आप लोग साइड हो जाइए।
चलिए भैया भैया कैमरा नहीं मत घुसिएगा।
क्या कर Honorable Deputy Chief Minister Shri Modi ji, Honorable Member of Parliament Shri N.K. Singh ji, Shri Swaminathan Aiyar ji.
एक मिनट
हाँ जी तुरंत
The state here has to be very clear, and state is your state where not only social sector programs, economic programs are doing very well. I would not like to review this job I have invested. I would like to mention only one thing. That our higher family appears to be quite strong, and not only keeping seminars here. This last year, maybe year also, there is seminar here. We are extremely grateful for that. We are extremely grateful. We are also very short notice. I have requested him to do Minister Aiyar. That's going to be a very memorable occasion for us, and I will request the Singh.
मैम हम लोग को सुनाई नहीं दे रहा। नहीं कर रहा भाग जा रहा उनको से लगा दो अरे पता लगा दिए फोटो हो गया भाई फोटो हो गया दे अच्छा ये आर्यन में लगा दो गाइस बच जाएगा ये करा दो ये लो
Swaminathan Aiyar was pursuing serious physics, although later on when he went to Oxford College he did master's. But as it has turned out, he has become one of our most leading commentators on economic issues, while his brother, Mr. Manishankar Aiyar, is really, developed great skills in the area of social sector, particularly on the working of Panchayat Raj and local institutions. Those of us who are familiar with Mr. Swaminathan Aiyar's writing will readily recognize that he always has somewhat out-of-the-box thinking when he begins to analyze. And if you read his two books, not only his book on his very famous work of globalization, but the more subsequent one on escaping from benevolent zookeepers, which was his more recent one. The benevolent zookeepers, he really means in multiple ways the cobweb of institutions and governance, which is really preventing the most productive solutions to the economy. His writings always are, apart from being analytical, suggesting solutions to issues which are of dominant economic concern. Recently, in the last 2 years, Swaminathan Aiyar has written rather extensively on Bihar issues. And I must also here say that he was very kind enough when I approached him for writing an essay in the book which Lord Nicholas Stern and myself are editing currently on the new development story about Bihar. He was generous enough to me to write a piece also for that proposed book. I think that there are few people who have seen the evolution of Indian economic policies at close quarters with a keen eye, like Mr. Swaminathan Aiyar, and therefore we look forward to his intervention today, his comments, with a great deal of interest. I knew that he was coming to Bihar. He had kindly rang me up to say that he was coming to Bihar, and it's a great pleasure for me that this was having the opportunity to be right here with the lady to speak on Bihar. So with these words, I request you to say your pleasure.
you. I was here 3 years ago, as I was said. I've come back. This is the position of learning rather than digesting what I have learned. But let me describe the totality of the journey. Before the budget, a very large number of foreign investors came to India. They all wanted to know what is going to happen, what will be the next election, whether we see government, will Nitish Kumar become Prime Minister, will be one versus the other. And there was a lot of concern about the future of India, what would happen. I had to tell them, relax. India is run by chief ministers and not prime ministers. CM is not CM. This is the big lesson that we are getting out of the last 10 years. Is that the main dynamic of India, the main sources of growth which are keeping us going. It is not that Manmohan Singh has been super active in New Delhi. Rather, people complain that he has been suffering from political paralysis. In that very period, a large number of state governments earlier grew very slowly, began to go much faster. What really happened, I think, was the economic liberalization of 1991. It opened up completely new opportunities. These were first taken advantage of by the coastal and the southern states. They were more developed, they were better equipped to plug into globalization. What did globalization mean? It meant that you needed to have the connectivity and the skills. And the connectivity of the coastal states and the skill levels were higher. They were able to plug in. On the so-called Vimaru belt, it was the other way around. And so there was a lack of connectivity even between village and village, let alone between the village and the town or between the town and the foreign city. But by now, what really happened in the first 10 years, I would say the existing advanced states took first advantage of the opportunities created by liberalization and globalization. In the last 10 years, all the heartland Indian states, they have managed to catch up. They have also gone for the same issues of connectivity, skill development. Those are the two fundamentals for creating opportunities and plugging into the global. It is not apparent in Bihar yet because it would be very difficult to find a globalized link here. Whereas Bihar, the outstanding part of it was creating connectivity between village and village, between town and town. So the road revolution and the telecom revolution together, these may not be seen as elements of globalization, and yet they are the fundamentals of connectivity, and that connectivity is what that gives rise to those opportunities. The question is, what is required to be done by the central government? What is required to be done here? What is required to be done by the central government, I would say, by and large, has already been accomplished. What were the central areas? They were in charge of foreign exchange, import exchange. They were in charge of industrial licensing. They were in charge of monetary system, the financial system. Many of those were opened up or liberalized bit by bit in the 1990s. On what remains, substantially what remains is within the ambit of the states. It's up to the states to take advantage of it and go ahead. And this, I think, has changed very substantially the nature of power between the center and the states. There's the idea that the center really matters. But I think the period between 1996 and 1998, when we had the third front government in New Delhi, I think that really revealed the new power structure. My old friend Indrajit Gupta had become Home Minister, and he had been agitating for 20 years for implementation of the police commission reform. So at long last he had become Home Minister. So we went over and said, become Home Minister. Why have you not enacted the police commission reforms? The poor man says, you know, I wrote to all the chief ministers, but only 2 of them replied and they both said no. So here we had this notion that the Home Minister is the second most powerful man in the whole of India. I mean, this was a traditional notion. The man was put into office and he could do nothing. Because the actual power lay with the chief minister. But even within New Delhi, the other example I gave is Mr. Devagowda. Decided that, you know, it's okay. I've been chief minister, now I'll go to a more important post called prime minister. What was the promotion? A more important post. He became prime minister. He was fighting every month of his 11 months for survival. But while that was on, at least Prime Minister, he had the pomp and glory of going abroad as Prime Minister. He made a trip to Singapore. And in Singapore, he met the Singapore Prime Minister and they had a meeting and he gave an assurance that Singapore Airlines, Tata joint venture airline will go through. People in Singapore were very happy. He came back. Nothing happened for 3 months, 6 months. The Singapore fellow said, what's happened? And Devagowda says, what to do? The civil aviation minister will not agree. In Singapore, they could not believe you can have a situation where a prime minister can be overruled by a civil aviation minister. It was beyond their comprehension. But in our kind of coalition politics, that turned out to be the case. Then somebody said, who is this cabinet member? Is he a communist or some other party? They said, no sir, he is Mr. Ibrahim from Devagowda's own party. In other words, you had a situation where the Prime Minister was unable to exert any discipline on any of the other ministers or even ministers of his own party, because the majority, the creation is so fragile that you cannot crack the whip. You have no ability to discipline the other people or make them fall in line. It was seen at that time, Manmohan Singh, slightly different situation, Keajriwal and Sonia Gandhi. And yet we have seen in the last 4 or 5 years the ability of Mamata Banerjee to crack the whip, and suddenly the entire resolve of 10 Janpath or 7 race course road put together suddenly dissolved. You raise the tax just by 5 rupees, Mamata creates a run and you roll it back, you are so proud. So I said, the power structure is such that in Delhi, there is fundamental weaknesses. There is a coalition era. We are not in an era of strong prime ministers where, and even if the person wants to be strong, as Indrajit Gupta showed, the actual ability is not there. Why is it not there? Because as I said, apart from these initial things like industrial licensing, foreign exchange, financial policy, everything else is actually done at the state level. 95% of Indians have never seen a central government officer. The only government they know are the state government officer. If you are in a rural village, the face of the government is the Thanedar and the Patwari and the state electricity board lines. These are all state government functionaries, central government functionaries. So that is what matters. In fact, I remember it was an interesting episode during the last state election in Rajasthan. There was Vasundhara Rajya, Prime Chief Minister. She was attempting to tell all the people, you know this Narega, I have given it to you. You must vote for BJP. Whereas the Congress was going around saying, no, Sonia has given this to you. You must vote for Congress. So when we went to a village and said, both sides are claiming credit for it. Who will the villagers give credit to? And roared with laughter and said, यहाँ तो सरपंच कहता नरेगा तो मैं देता हूँ. Who is Sonia and who is Vasundhara? If you are my friend, you get a job card. If you are not my friend, you don't get a job card. So it is once again putting down the difficulty of transmission of authority and transmission of power. But definitely, if you have a strong chief minister is able to, with the cooperation of a strong bureaucracy, achieve a certain amount of discipline and get programs done. This has proved possible in ways which it has not been possible in New Delhi. This combination of a strong chief minister and strong bureaucracy, a strong empowered bureaucracy which has the right to experiment with new ideas, has the right to go out and it will be backed up by the chief minister. This is a model Nitish Kumar has followed in Bihar. It is equally the model of Naveen Patnaik in Odisha. It is the model of Raman Singh in Chhattisgarh. It is the model of Shivraj Chauhan and Madhya Pradesh. So a number of these once backward poor states have taken this model. And this model has worked also well in some of the advanced states. Gujarat is very much that same model. Strong chief minister with strong empowered bureaucracy. Tamil Nadu is very much that kind of model. So this particular model, it would appear, has worked quite well. There was no conscious adoption of this model by these former Bimaru states. But that seems to be one reason, that one thing that they have in common, which has enabled them to advance forward. Having seen that one thing which is among them in common, you find that all the Bimaru states have not followed that model. Jharkhand has had enormous lack of political stability, so there is no model of strong chief minister. Uttar Pradesh has always been different. Chief Minister can sometimes be strong, but there is no accord bureaucracy. The bureaucracy is highly politicized, highly divided. Rajasthan, again, you don't get that particular moment. So the states of the Hindi are the fellows who have done well in the strong Chief Minister and strong empowered bureaucracy model. And the others would need to learn from that. Beyond that, I think looking at the entirety, the successful states have all followed completely different key strategies. There is no one model of success, there is no one single path to heading to fast growth. I think the first thing to note is that none of the chief ministers had a conscious aim of, I want fast growth. They actually went for good governance and they went for inclusion and improving the quality of the minds of people. Fast growth was an outcome, not a specific aim that began answers. In Bihar, there will be many theories of how to bring about fast growth. But out here, we had a situation where the law and order situation had been so bad in the earlier period that it had become the biggest single obstacle to any economic opportunity or advancement. I don't think this was seen by any of us sitting in Delhi. We had various ideas of why Bihar was not developing, that Lali was not interested and so on. But the fact that law and order and gangsterism had been a problem for so many years, but none of us saw this as critical to developing economics. So then we had Mr. Nitish Kumar and this very imaginative use of the Arms Act. And using the Arms Act, it was possible to have some very quick trials, which was not possible earlier. And tens of thousands of gangsters were prepared. And this one single act enormously induced economic activity and accelerated economic growth in ways that I have not seen in any economic model of the World Bank or IMF or Marx or Karl Marx. And yet it proved an extremely, I think it's a lesson for all chief ministers. But certainly it came out of there as one key issue. The second one was the emphasis on roads. On this actually there is a considerable economic literature. Arun Ashok Gulati, who is now head of the Agricultural Prices Commission, he and other people in ADRI had produced a study, and they had gone into different things that help improve rural productivity. Availability of fertilizers, irrigation, pesticides, government extension, roads, rural electrification. What is the return on all of this? By far the most important of those factors turned out to be rural roads. It really surprised me. I thought electricity would be more important or agricultural extension. But the rate of return, agriculture on road investment is as high as 26%. None of the others is higher than 7 or 8%. So I doubt very much whether Mr. Nitish Kumar actually got the advice from ADRI. But in his own wisdom, he was able to see the key nature of roads in kick-starting economy. And so you had this peculiar combination of road construction and putting criminals in jail as being a magic formula for restarting growth, which I've never seen in any textbook. But this kind of thing needs to be the put down, that the sources of growth are mentioned. I have now come back and now we have seen some additional things which have kept that fast growth going. There has been the emphasis on the social sector, which was not there earlier and is basically has been the biggest failing of the Bihar government. Social indicators historically were extremely low. They were far better in South India, far better in the West. My original impression before coming right now was that Bihar remains a laggard in this particular thing. I think this impression arose mainly because the poverty data of the 2009-10 did not show any significant fall. And this was a very grave disappointment for lots of us who had spoken in glowing terms about the Bihar model. They said there has been all this fast growth. Why has there not been a fall in poverty? And there was a general view that maybe there has been a neglect of the social sector. And if you come here, I find that fortunately that's not true. At present, there's been a very sharp fall in things like infant mortality. The infant mortality rate, which used to be much higher than the national average, has now come down to equal the national average. So Bihar is no longer, cannot be said to be pulling India down. It is at a level. Certainly when the census figures came out, we saw that there was a 17% increase in literacy. And to me the most mind-blowing was 20% increase in female literacy. in 10 years. I don't think that has been achieved anywhere in the world. It's not 20%, it's 20 percentage points. In some ways even more impressive. So very clearly, there's been the attention in the social sector. Then the question was, however, there is no electricity. That remains a long-term problem. It can only be overcome with a considerable gap. It takes time to put that. So is it possible to have an acceleration of growth? Okay, to begin with, you can have a boom because law and order and roads. But how can this be sustained if you don't have industry and you don't have electricity? I had great doubts on this when I came 3 years ago. I see from the data that not only has the growth been maintained, it has even accelerated some figures of 11 and 13% for the last 2 years. I have to tell you that I have some doubts about the state GDP data. The reason is that if I did an exercise just for 2010 level, all the states are claiming very high rates of growth. Then you say, because the national average is so low, normally half have to be below the average now. So who are these guys below the average? And it's very difficult to find them. Then I did an exercise of the state growth weighted by population. If you use the state data, it appears that India is growing at 8%, whereas the CSO says we only grew at 6.2%. So there is a kind of significant gap between what the states are claiming and what the CSO is. This has to be resolved at some point. But even if you then say, let us have some downward adjustment of the state data, it still remains Bihar belt has grown fast. It still remains that Bihar has grown very fast in this particular period. So it would appear that focusing on the social services itself also has a positive impact on economy. I have not seen this demonstrated very clearly anywhere else. But Bihar is one case where it would appear that this is one thing that you can point to. That if you want fast growth, it is not just about attracting industry. It is not just about having ample power. All those are useful, all those are needed, but they, at least in the short run, at least for 5-7 years, these may not be the solutions. What were the lessons we got from the other states? I think Naveen Patnaik in Orissa, he has won 3 elections. Nitish Kumar has won 2. We hope he wins the third. But Naveen is willing to hope, he's hoping to win a 4th election. What has been his focus? He has not focused on social issues. His social indicators are bad. His health and they are not good. He focused, his enormous focus actually was anti-corruption. He is the only chief minister who has sacked more than 20 of his cabinet ministers over the years for corruption. It is not that Orissa is a state without corruption. There is a lot of corruption in many places. If you want to take iron ore and go from an illegal mine onto an illegal transportation onto an illegal port, and you are taking bribes all along the way, that is still happening there. But nevertheless, you have a chief minister who has been able to bring this particular thing. Anti-corruption is the way to go. In the process, of course, that he empowered his bureaucracy in a big way. With Orissa in 2000, I remember when I was looking at the financial data of the state governments, it was the worst state in terms of state finances. It looked beyond redemption. It had the highest fiscal deficit, the highest public debt to GDP. What can rescue the state? Then there is this particular gentleman from New Delhi who can't speak any Oriya, who proposes to change this whole thing. And we all laughed at that particular time. Yet the man managed to do it. He managed to do it by simply saying that, if you get the system in order, empower the bureaucracy, make it clear to the people that you are against corruption. He was industry friendly in the beginning. A lot of industry came up under him. Now, he has run into serious problems on the tribal and the forest areas. A large thing like POSCO after 10 years has not got off the ground. Vedanta aluminium is held up. There was one area between 2 rivers he was proposing to have 20 steel plants at one time. That was complete madness. Environmentally, I can tell you, it never has been done. But but only 1 or 2 have come up. Bhushan Steel and Asmo. They have come up. The Kalinganagar part of the Tatas is coming up. So he has managed to attract very large scale industry. He has managed to get into a power surplus situation. He's a man who has successfully harnessed the mineral wealth to progress, combined with anti-corruption and with strong trust. When I go over to another of the successful states is Madhya Pradesh. This was not the case initially. In his first term, Shivraj Chauhan did not produce very fast growth. he was not particularly noticed at any of the areas. The state had shortages of power, the infrastructure was not that good, it was in. Again, he got himself an anti-corruption election. He had done enough to get re-elected, although I was doubtful. I remember when I went to that last election. In Bhopal, they only got water 3 days a week. I said, can you get re-elected if you can only supply water to the capital city for 3 days a week? But he got re-elected. But in the second span, he has considerably managed to accelerate economic growth in that particular state. And in the last 2 years, he has managed to apparently do double-digit growth. In fact, he came to Washington DC last summer when I was there with this particular slogan: India's growth, 6.5%. Madhya Pradesh growth, 11.8%. Come and invest in Madhya Pradesh. You know, it would be unthinkable in the past for anybody from Madhya Pradesh to come to America expecting to attract investment. The image was so bad that Bimaru state, things are not available. And yet he managed to bring about a fast growth. When you look at it, it is not, I mean, there has been some sectors of industry, the Bhopal Indore belt has come up. The soybean revolution has been good for Madhya Pradesh. But the biggest thing that, as far as I could see, that Shivraj Chauhan has managed to do, that he has brought about a wheat revolution. How do you bring about a green revolution? You cannot do it just by having high-yielding seeds and fertilizers. Because if a farmer spends a lot of money on these inputs, he immediately gets a large crop. But if you don't have a good distribution system to take it away, there is a crash in local prices. And he has to sell to the local trader at a very low price. He is then unable to be sure of getting a good return. When the Green Revolution strategy began in Punjab, Haryana, the World Bank came in and said that along with irrigation, along with seeds, you will have to create the rural road system and the rural mandi system, where farmer within 10 miles, within 50 miles, he will reach a procurement center, there will be fair weighing arrangements, and the grain will be taken away. So even if I produce much more, it does not result in collapse in prices. This is a very integral part of the success of the Green Revolution. Problem the Green Revolution spreading to the Bimaru states was lack of this ancillary development. The rural roads, the mandis, the procurement centers, they were not there. When I came last time, Nitish Kumar protested, he says, Food Corporation of India does nothing. And the farmer suffers because the price falls below. Naveen Patnaik told me the same thing when I went to Orissa. Then I think Shivraj Chauhan's innovation was saying, why should I wait for the Food Corporation of India? Why should I wait for central government? They are not going to help me. I am in any case a BJP government. He spent 3,000 crores, I believe, on upfront investment to create the basic infrastructure to allow a large-scale procurement program. Once he did that, last year, brought 7.5 million tons of wheat. It was a phenomenal achievement for a state that used to be regarded as completely. I mean, 7.5 million tons of wheat is as much as Punjab used to procure in the early days of the Green Revolution. So I think in this he has given a clear lesson. Over and above that, of course, he is now surplus in power. He is lucky enough to have large, rocky and barren areas, so he is able to offer land to industry very cheap. But that's also a lesson, I think. You need to identify the rocky and barren areas, and these have to be reserved to develop for industry. But what is done on agriculture, I think, is the important lesson for everybody. It has partly been, this route has been taken, if you like, by Singh in Chhattisgarh. There also he has gone for procuring paddy directly from the farmer. Earlier there was that particular problem. Now he is procuring very large amounts. In fact, the amounts are so large, people said, this is not all Chhattisgarh paddy. It is coming in from Orissa. Naveen Patnaik has failed to put in the procurement system there. So from there, farmers are sending paddy all the way to Chhattisgarh to be procured. At the same time, I also see some illogicality and irrationality in what Singh has done. So I asked his secretary judge, I said, you are procuring from the farmer at 20 rupees. And then you say on public distribution, you are going to give back to every farmer at 1 rupee. I said, is there not a illogicality taking it away and giving the same thing back? Why don't you just give him a cash transfer? He said, this is not possible. Because he says, the first and most important thing is that I have to do the procurement. Once I do the procurement, I have to sell it to somebody now. So even though it's inefficient, even though it's a waste of money, I have to do it back in the particular file. But of course, more important than just doing it right, Singh has had to face the problem of Maoism. We had a situation where 167 districts had serious cases of Maoism, but brought up by entire number of things. coupled with Bihar maybe, but Chhattisgarh was by far the worst. A lot of investors the world over are very worried about it. A lot of critics within India. Raman Singh has shown that even if you have the worst Maoist problem in India, you can still do 10% growth. And that I think nobody had realized yet. And that was certainly a major. How we have done it, we'll have to go into the details. I have not started that state in sufficient detail. But I believe Raigad district has become the 10th most industrialized district in the whole of India. I mean, poor states always had minerals. They always had iron, they had coal, they had aluminum, but he has managed to harness them to the people. That has been a major achievement. He has managed to reduce Maoism, Kusalwajudam, which is extremely unpopular. So that is probably an example of how not to do it. But nevertheless, Maoism has come down, and this is something which all the other states are going to have to grapple with. Jharkhand has not yet managed to do it. So it needs to get its acts together. It needs to get to a situation where there is a proper quality and a proper bureaucracy. Where do we go from here? As I don't pretend I have all the answers. But what is very clear is that we now have a large number of models of success from different states. What Bihar has done and succeeded in should be a lesson for the others. What Naveen has done, what Raman Singh has done, what Shivraj Chauhan, all of these hold lessons, I think, for every other state it can learn from. I think one of the things Bihar will have to learn is that we have gone a long way with the promotion of law and order. Although people say it's now deteriorating, and if that is true, then it's a matter of reason. The roads are good as they go. The fact that you're getting power is good. At some point of time, you will have to shift people out of agriculture into industry and services in a very big way. This is a state which is still, I believe, almost 90% rural. The amount of land is very limited. As long as people remain on the land, they will not have the chance of improving their productivity. So the question is, how do you move people out of agriculture into industry and services? I had originally thought that with Nitish Kumar coming, there might be a big boost to manufacturing. I'm told by Mr. Sushil Modi that there's a problem that because land is so densely populated, if you get 100 acres for an industry, you might be dealing with 200 farmers. And so land acquisition is a very, very serious problem, and it's coming in the way. All I can say is, I do not know how you can get out of this problem, but you will have to get out of it. You will need to industrialize in a very substantial way. Maybe you can, to some extent, bypass it by going into services in a bigger way. Services don't require such large amounts of land. A very tall office building can accommodate a lot of services. So perhaps there should be strategic terms. You go in that direction. In any case, when I go through the streets, I find all the advertisements about this training course and that training course and these classes and these tutorials. So I mean, the standards of Bihar in these matters are not high. So it is not an automatic place for service center development. But it seems to me that strategic, perhaps that is one of the ways in which you should be going. I know that the state has been agitating for special category status. Personally, I would say I would oppose this. But this is not a backward state. I mean, Patna, the Bihar, this was the heartland of the greatest civilizations that India has produced. The state has gone backward, if you like, in the last 30 years. But historically, it's a very much one of the most developed, one of the most well-developed states. Most fertile land in India, the best economic conditions. You need to make better use of that. The more, I mean, I went to Punjab, I had to say, the same thing was that they said we don't have any minerals. I said, gentlemen, you have fertile soil, which is the most important mineral of all. I mean, if only some of the backward states had your soil, Rajasthan would rather have your soil than have the minerals of the Arabians. So Bihar also has it. So agriculture would be a very major area where you should be able to make advances. You need to get the kind of research facilities that Punjab Agriculture University became famous for. I think you need to develop it. You would need to say that this becomes a center of excellence for new varieties. Within this, I believe that in the state they have banned all trials of genetically modified varieties. I would caution against that. There is a very huge global Greenpeace environmental movement against genetically modified food. But I am very clear in my own mind that it is one of the most important parts of the future of technology. You need to not only go into it, but specialize into it. Yes, and if you are going to have universities here of agricultural excellence, I think you cannot possibly avoid going into that genetically modified area. It should be seen as an opportunity. Beyond that, I have, my ears are open to listen to how this can be solved rather than have solution. One other little thing I brought up was the question of sand mining. In a large number of other states in India, sand mining has been banned by the courts. Historically, the sand in the rivers was used for construction. And you make concrete, 1/3 of that is sand. So sand is India is still a very poor country. The amount of construction that has to take place, we require huge amounts of sand. And yet the historical source of sand, the river beds, has been banned for environmental reasons. So the thing that struck me is that in Bihar, there is this huge amount of sand coming out of the Himalayas, carried by the rivers. Young rock, relatively large coarse grain. There are other areas where silt is regarded as highly fertile. In Bihar, as I understand it, this rock coming out of there is regarded as dead sand. It is not fertile. To the extent it inundates the large areas, they are converted infertile. Equally, it is clogging up the rivers, which then causes flooding. It is clogging up all the canals and causing flooding out there. So the idea that struck me was, earlier on people said, look, to increase the capacity of the river and the canals, desilting can be done. But desilting is too expensive, it's not worthwhile. But if now on desilting, if the sand has value and can be exported to the rest of India, it seems to me that this is a mineral resource which has been overlooked till now. The price of sand I investigated in Delhi the other day, they said it's more than 1,000 rupees a ton. Sir, Bihar used to sell coal at that price not so long ago. So this is the price of sand, and it seems to me that's a major mineral resource then going to. Of course, there's a question of what is the quality of the sand. Not all sands are of equal quality. This kind of sand may require some processing, further grinding, whatever. But it seems to me that even in mineral terms, that is one new area which Bihar can explore in going forward. So I think I have said as much as I want to. As I'm here on a journey of exploration, I would love to listen rather than just lecture on where Bihar is going to go in the future. Thank you very much.
The floor is open. Mr. Aiyar, to take some questions.
Mr. Aiyar, you seem to have propagated a new type of democracy in the states where a chief minister becomes very dominant, assisted by a very dominant bureaucrat. Is this a healthy development? Is it not a failure on the part of leadership to evolve responsible democratic parties wherefrom they get much more assistance than from the bureaucracy? So this train of emergence of very strong chief ministers assisted by a very strong bureaucracy, is it healthy? It is a good development. Will it lead to better human developments indicators?
I would have ab initio, I would say it could go either way. It could be good, it could be bad. In the actual circumstances where I see it in India, by and large it has been good. You would say that in the emergency, when you had a very strong Prime Minister and strong bureaucracy, did it work well? And I would say no, it did not work well. In those circumstances, it did not. But right now, if you see what the way Tamil Nadu has developed, or the way Gujarat has developed, it is not the case that the individual politician, other than the chief minister, has no power at all. How is Gujarat during the last elections? And we ask, how is this thing working? So there are two kinds of models of how the political class works. One is there's a relatively weak chief minister, and there are a large number of other fiefdoms. It is not that all these other politicians are attempting to promote their own vision of development or accelerate it. Rather, they are trying to carve out fiefdoms where they themselves rule and nothing can happen without their vote. Even in the tribal area, there is a problem that you have various tribal guys. That the money must come to me, I will disburse, it is done through a patronage network, and those guys are then responsible to me. It is not being done on the criteria on which it should actually work. In other words, it would appear that normal rule of law in many parts of India got subverted. Instead of having a system where the political class as a whole was facilitating what was the ostensible policy of the government funds would be used in effect to nourish individual fiefdoms all over the place. In these circumstances, having a strong chief minister and a strong bureaucracy, that then improves the situation considerably. In this limited situation, I can think of other situations where that might not be the case. But if you look at a large number of states where there have been failures, they tend to be states with fiefdoms where actual supposed government policy does not actually get implemented. Funds meant for a particular purpose don't actually go for the purposes. They are bypassed and put into the pockets of the people. This has got cut in these successful states.
A couple of questions.
Yes.
And so one small question, there is an economic freedom index, a German think tank, they prepare this list. So is that, are you hearing me, sir?
Yes.
Is it audible, sir?
Audible, he's asking it, it's audible.
Yeah, there is one economic freedom of states index.
Yes.
This is prepared by a German think tank.
Yes.
So in that index, Bihar is still for the last 3 years.
Yes.
It is at the bottom level.
Yeah.
So why it is so? And why it is not coming up the ladder in terms of economic freedom?
This is one of the reasons, in fact, for my visit. I happen to be one of the authors of that study. So one reason I came here was, why is it that Bihar remains at the bottom of this particular list? The problem with the index itself had a problem.
Yeah.
It was derived from the Fraser Institute's index for the economic freedom of the world, which compared various countries. Now when you compare various countries, the most important things of freedom turned out to be things like exchange rate, freedom of imports, various things which we couldn't apply between states. So we tried to find parameters which would be relevant between states. And at the end of it, I have to tell you that we are not fully satisfied that the important things that matter in terms of economic freedom, many of the most important ones, there are no data. If, for instance, you want to tell me how easy is it to get a construction permit, Bihar as compared to Rajasthan, Tamil Nadu, I have no way of finding out. If you want to say how much of a bribe do I have to get this, I mean, these are the most important parameters. What it does have, however, you are on the worst place to complete property. So on that score, that this is what indicators of unpaid judicial no respect in which it seems that, it was not. What's very clear is we have been unable in our to capture the effect of a large road network. You are unable to capture that. You are unable to capture the arms acting. So to some extent, our index itself is faulty. And this is something we'll have to explain as to how, therefore, Bihar managed to have this high rate of economic growth without having a high economic freedom index. At the same time, it also shows that these are the areas of law and order, crime, judicial appointments which need to be filled up. These remain weaknesses within Bihar.
Thank you, sir. I read it in fact in one of your articles only. That is why I
एक मिनट, आपने अपने संबोधन में जो कहा बहुत अच्छा कहा, लेकिन एक चीज जो आपने कही
कि स्पेशल कैटेगरी स्टेटस बिहार के लिए शायद उतना जरूरी नहीं है या इसका फास्ट बहुत अच्छा रहा, लेकिन जो प्रेजेंट है उसके हिसाब से और खास करके जो सेकेंडरी और प्राइमरी सेक्टर डेवलप नहीं तेजी से कर रहा है, सर्विसेज सेक्टर डेवलप कर रहा है, टर्सरी सेक्टर, और वो भी प्राइमरी सेक्टर में प्राइमरी सेक्टर का मेन सब सेक्टर एग्रीकल्चर तेजी से नहीं बढ़ रहा है। उसी तरह से मैन्युफैक्चरिंग सेक्टर में, सेकेंडरी सेक्टर में मैन्युफैक्चरिंग जो उसका सबसे इम्पोर्टेंट सब सेक्टर है वह भी स्लोली बढ़ रहा है। तो गिवन दिस लिमिटेशंस और डिटेल्स में हम नहीं जा रहे हैं, लेकिन निकलने का एक ही रास्ता है, स्पेशल कैटेगरी स्टेटस के कारण जो सुविधाएं बिहार को मिलेंगी तो हम सेकेंडरी में मैन्युफैक्चरिंग को और प्राइमरी सेक्टर में एग्रीकल्चर को तेजी से बढ़ा सकते हैं। सर्विसेज पर से हमारा डिपेंडेंस थोड़ा घटेगा और तभी हम इस जो हाई इकोनॉमिक ग्रोथ रेट को मेंटेन कर सकेंगे। तो आपने जो कह दिया इस पर हम चाहेंगे अगर कुछ और कहा जा सके कि स्पेशल कैटेगरी स्टेटस के बिना इतना पीछे रहते हुए केवल हाई इकोनॉमिक ग्रोथ रेट के कारण ही हम एवरेज को पकड़ने में माननीय मुख्यमंत्री बराबर कहते रहते हैं, बड़ी बात है कि 25-30 वर्ष लगेंगे तभी एवरेज को पकड़ने में। तो आप कोई फार्मूला बतावें कि उसके बिना हम कैसे जाएंगे?
There was no commensurate effort of potential scale building in many of the states, especially in South and Western India. States were built, and we are seeing the debut in the period. And now it's the situation that only the strong are being strengthened. Nevertheless, as you have rightly said, that we have to go from agriculture to industry. Now in the landlocked state, especially in India and especially in Bihar, there is no problem. I mean, we are one of the fastest growing states. There is no more lethargy as far as the state is concerned. We are really changing. But is it possible to grow in a landlocked region without a special tax concession? That is a very difficult thing. I mean, apart from the more devolution from the central entity, which will help us in building our infrastructure. But this, I think one of the key elements of bringing or attracting investment will be the tax concession, which is integral part of the special category.
The special category status should not be mixed up with the special scheme that Manmohan Singh gave for tax-free production out of Uttarakhand or Madhya Pradesh for a limited period. President in Uttarakhand, till 2010, any new factory that began got excise duty accepted for a certain number of years, which ended in, after 2010, it was disbanded, but it gave Uttarakhand a big push. But that is different from the special category states. Because there were special category states earlier, we did not necessarily get that tax break. The special category state was supposed to be the equivalent of what Minister Nitish Kumar would call Mahadalit. Was supposed to be the worst of the worst, the poorest of the poor. Enormous problem. I mean, historically, if you have black land, building roads in the east, building roads in the hill areas, cost 20 times as much per mile as building roads in the flat area. So this was a very, very huge problem. In some particular cases, they were so remote that there were telephone lines, there was electricity in a flat land like we explained, but there was absolutely nothing after that. They had to start from complete scratch. So that was the kind of state that was supposed to get special category. As far as the backwardness of Bihar was concerned, I mean the Gatkill formula in any case was giving relatively poor states or states without good social facilities, because the Gatkill formula and the finance commissions, provision was already being made for the Bihar states on account of their being backward. They got disproportionately high share of central finances. Disproportionately high share, which has come in fact very, very useful in the last 10 years. Because the central government revenue has boomed. A huge amount of that revenue has come in. So without any change in status, there has been a change phenomenally the amount of money coming from New Delhi. So that has been a very major thing. But when you see that, Bihar still has this beautiful agriculture. You have all your ancient road, arterial connections, you have your railway connections. In no sense, kind of backward state. When you say, how do I move to the next? It's up to you to experiment and find out. But I find in some ways Raman Singh is doing it, in some ways Naveen Patnaik is doing it, in some ways Shivraj Chauhan is doing it. I mean, you have to think of ways of doing it. One way I have suggested, for instance, can you go the service way? Can you say that, we will try to focus on skill building rather than that? Can you have a situation where, for instance, for an industry, typically, a fellow says, I need 150 acres because I'm putting up this tax credit. But actually, in that 150 acres, he's also putting up an entire housing colony and schools and maybe even a tennis courts and whatnot. If you say, I will only have the core area for the factory, and the people will then be living in the town itself, and this will then lead to the town development. That might be one way where the core fact, the amount of land you actually require comes down. It's an idea I'm giving. But there is no shortage of places with no obvious natural resources that have managed to do that. It is not true, for instance, that interior, when Hyderabad is very far from the sea, it is Bangalore is very far from the sea. USA is not a landlocked state, but the cities have no obvious connectivity. Delhi,
We have one additional problem, floods. It is not under our control.
No, I do. I mean, you have the largest exposure to floods. Bengal also has a problem. Assam has a very severe problem, and Eastern UP has a problem. Yes, flooding is a parasit. It is, I agree, but not because of the flooding. It's for the other reasons. Yeah. So, as I said, it is up to you to devise ways. But it seems to me that with the revenue bonanza, and in one way, the thing is that by growing by 11% for so many years, you have proved that it is not necessary. You have shown that, even without the special